Welcome to Jenesis Gems, a podcast for the advice community, where we explore the evolution of advice, brand and marketing, and leadership. I'm your host, Jenny Pearce. This season, we're looking at business through the lens of then, now, next, shining a light on where we've come from, what's driving us today, and where we're heading next. All, of course, with a marketing twist. Let's get into it. Welcome, everybody. Today, I'm joined by Adam McCann, Managing Director of Bartons Chartered Accountants and Wealth Advisors, a multidisciplinary business delivering accounting, wealth, lending, and business advisory services. Adam recently stepped into the Managing Director role, leading a well-established and highly regarded business into its next chapter. Welcome, Adam.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Jenny.
Before we dive into then, now, next, which I think I may have explained to you in our pre-discussions that, Genesis is celebrating its 20th year in business. I know Bartons has certainly celebrated more than that. So why don't you give us a quick snapshot of where Bartons is today and your role as Managing Director?
Yeah, well, thank you and congratulations on 20 years. Last year, Bartons celebrated their 60th anniversary. Sometimes I feel like I've been here that long, but I haven't been. Look, I guess Bartons started originally as just a small accounting firm, and we've grown from there to having the three main divisions. We've got the tax and accounting, the financial planning, and the lending. A team of about 40 here in Adelaide in South Australia. We've got also 5 staff in the Philippines as well. And we've got our specialisation in advice to medical professionals. We're looking after just under 1,000 doctors here in Adelaide. We do provide advice to a range of other, business owners, high net worth type clients as well. And we are part of the broader Buongiorno national network of firms, and that's the name that some of your listeners may be familiar with. But the Buongiorno firm in Melbourne originally started in 1964, the year before we kicked off here in Adelaide. But there we have, a presence in every mainland capital city, and that network's currently providing advice to about 14,000 doctors Australia-wide. So I believe that makes them the biggest privately owned group that specialise in advice to doctors.
Wow, that's actually truly impressive. 1964 is a long time ago.
It is.
That's actually really impressive, and particularly based in Adelaide. I mean, that's very impressive. I guess the market is different. Do you service across the Australia, or are you just very concentrated into the local market?
The bulk of our clients are based here in South Australia, but because we do provide advice to a lot of doctors, they can move around. So, we do have medicos right around Australia that we look after. And, with technology like Zoom, for instance, today, that tyranny of distance isn't what it used to be. And we do, I travel around a bit as well. So we do get interstate from time to time to see those clients face to face.
I must admit, technology isn't always my friend, but I'm very, very grateful for it. So, all right, let's dive in to then. Just obviously really keen to get to know the man behind the desk. Let's start with your own journey. What drew you into financial advice in the first place?
I'm second generation. My father was a financial advisor.
Oh, wow.
And I started doing a bit of part-time work with him when I was in my mid-teens. Interestingly, I vowed and declared at the ripe age of 16 that I never wanted to be a financial advisor. And I went on and qualified as a pilot. I was on a pathway to becoming a commercial pilot. And then the world changed a bit. I don't know for some of the listeners that kind of remember back to the 80s, we had the recession that we had to have, and then we had the pilots dispute, and sort of the pathway to get into becoming a commercial pilot became a bit of a difficult one at that time. So I just continued on in financial services, and here I am 40 years later, still in the profession. And look, I reflect, I love flying, but I know that the thing that I'm passionate about is actually working with people. And, in terms of the role of being in an integrated firm, you're really blessed with the opportunities of being able to work with people and see them sort of achieve a lot over an extended period of time. So I think I did land in the right vocation.
Well, as they say, some things happen for a reason. So, not sure we wanted the recession, but
No.
I'm glad it led you to the door of financial advice. Obviously, you weren't always with Bartons, so let's just for a moment share some discussion around those early days. So, what were they like for you? Obviously, you mentioned second generation. What were the learnings back in the day? I mean, we all cut our teeth on things, but
Yeah.
sometimes it's sort of working with clients, working with, the people around us. What were those key learnings like back then?
Yeah, look, reflecting on that, I was really fortunate to have a great mentor in my father who was highly successful. But I did learn some things from him at the same time. He worked himself so hard that he burnt out, and he ran into some significant health issues. And I found myself at the ripe age of 23 running the family business, which had been, not what I'd, planned to do. So I think that gave me a bit of insight in terms of you can be a really successful advisor, but you want to have balance and you do need to look after yourself. I can remember, being in my early 20s and sitting at maybe the kitchen table with clients, a bit different to what we do today. And it was a very different dynamic in terms of the way we engage. But the fundamentals are the same. We're very much in the people business, and you've got two ears and a mouth, and if you sort of use them in that ratio, if you listen to people, if you find out what people are trying to achieve, that's I think a key, to success in terms of any vocation. And so I had a steep learning curve, dealing maybe with people in their 50s and 60s, and I'm a kid at the time. It wasn't easy, but the harder I worked, the luckier I got. And three simple things back when I was young, and maybe for younger advisors listening in today, three simple things. Say please and thank you. Turn up on time. But the third one, not an easy one, do what you say you're going to do. So don't under-promise. Well, if you under-promise and over-deliver, you're going to put yourself in a better position.
Correct. Oh, that's very, very wise words, most definitely. I must admit, I love the comment around you've got two ears and a mouth. And sometimes we use our mouth a lot more than we do use our ears. I do totally agree with that. So listening is quite the fine art. So, um, you obviously had a career path there, and obviously were hard launched, I would say, into advice. But you then joined Barton's in 2010,
Yes.
from memory.
Yeah.
What sort of led to that decision? What was the motivation for you at the time?
I'd been in a small group firm at one stage. It was just shared resources. And I received some advice from a mentor. I'll talk a bit more about him as we go through the podcast, but he did say to me, look, there's no alignment between these two people you're working with. And so it was around about 2003, I stepped out and just ran my own operation for a short period of time. That led to an opportunity to go into a joint venture. And I think that was a pivotal change in that instead of just sort of working and seeking to get referrals and having my own client group, it was when I started to collaborate with particularly accountants that I started to see some real changes in the way my business operated.
Mm.
That led to a joint venture with a group called Moore Stevens. They're an international accounting brand. And I ran a joint venture with another advisor here in South Australia where we provided the financial services and Moore Stevens provided the accounting work. And I think from early on in my career, I did have this vision of the integrated advice piece, and that was the starting point. The difference was with a JV, and I think JVs can work quite well, but there was a bit of, we weren't all in it together in that the accountants had what they were trying to achieve, the financial advisors had what they were seeking to achieve. And we had differential ownership. I didn't own any of the accounting business. They didn't own any. They owned a bit of the financial planning business. So that wasn't, I don't think, a perfect model. There is no perfect business model, though, I would say. But in terms of the move to Bartons, the thing that really got me excited was there were the 3 divisions, and anyone that was an owner, director, shareholder had equal proportions in each part of the business. And I use the analogy of everyone being in the same boat, rowing in the same direction. I think if you've got that equal ownership across organisation, although you might have professions from different disciplines, that sort of draws you together so that you're all pulling in the same general direction.
Yeah, I think back in the day, JVs were quite the solution to everything. I think the whole integration model wasn't really around as it stands today. It's far more accepted today than it probably was, back in the earlier days, 10, 20 years ago. So I think it was a brave step for you to take to, go, look, it's time. An integrated model is the right model. Was there a particular, obviously joining Bartons, you had your own client base. Was there a narrative or, like what was there? Was there a specific process that you undertook to really ensure that it was a seamless process for your clients and for the business in general? Or, were there a few bumps and scrapes along the way?
It's something that we're working on and it's evolving all the time. So I think if you stand still, you do start to go backwards. Providing integrated advice can be a two-edged sword. In that you're going to be judged by the lowest common denominator, in that, if someone gets a bad service outcome, let's say in the financial planning division, that can affect the accounting division and vice versa. So I think, communication is a big part of what we need to do. We do work very hard behind the scenes so that when a client comes in, all of the relevant advisors that would be looking after that particular client or that family are fully briefed on what needs to be happening. But it's something that you have to continue to invest time and energy in to make sure that you get that service delivery where you want to get
Yeah,
it
that's
to.
so very true. Sometimes the left hand and the right hand don't talk. And that happens in any business, not just necessarily even in integrated models. So I guess that's, it is, as you say, something you have to continuously work on.
Yeah.
Um, let's just sort of, I guess, in our earlier career paths, we all have those moments where we think, oh, this is either going to work really, really well or not at all. Was there a key challenge or highlight in those earlier years that, you can really sit back and look on and go, oh, okay, that did work really well, or okay, not so hot?
Look, I think it was that scary time when I stepped away from that corporate group that I was working with and went by myself in my early 30s.
Yeah.
And that was, that wasn't an easy time, but it was an important step to get me to where I needed to get to.
Mm.
When I was in that JV relationship, a couple of years into it, I just realised that the other advisor that I was working with, really talented advisor, but we wasn't a meeting of the minds. And so I think you do need to be really careful who you go into business with. It's a little bit like getting married. You spend sometimes more time, with your business partners than you do with your spouse.
Oh,
And
that's
so,
true.
actually getting that right group of people where you're all on the same page is a pretty key thing. So I did have that sort of moment where I realised, okay, the JV was working financially, but I wasn't really happy in terms of the group that I was working in. And then it was time to make the change. And then when I came here to Bartons, broadly, the group of people working together were all pushing in the same direction. And we've continued to work on that, over the last 16 years since I've been here.
Yeah. I'm just thinking, obviously in a very senior leadership role today, and no doubt and we'll touch on this as we go. And you've held a number of senior leadership roles in your career. Looking back, was there something that that created a foundation that you've been able to shape as your career has progressed? Back in the day, was it sort of, as I said, being hard launched at 23 or running a business, or was there something else that you found that you've carried with you throughout your career?
in terms of the role that I'm in at the moment, I really never aspired to be the managing director here at Bartons. It's sort of something that evolved over time. We talk about the role of managing director as, maybe being the first among equals. And I think we do have very much a consensus approach to what we do. Look, I go back to those earlier years. It's like when you do the hard work, you put in the preparation. When preparation meets opportunity, the doors then open. I kind of think back to earlier times. There were a few opportunities that I was aggressively going after and the door didn't open. And that was for a good reason. It probably wasn't right. I wasn't ready, or the opportunity wasn't necessarily the right fit. So I think sometimes the harder you push with something, that's probably a clear indication that that's maybe not the right direction. And, I've been a big believer in continuing to reinvest in yourself. And I've got a lot from different leadership authors over the years. And Dan Sullivan is a name that you probably may have heard over the years. But he talks about this process of you might set a goal and objective that you're working to, but there can be unintended beneficial consequences. So you set this goal, you've got momentum towards that objective. You don't always reach that goal, but sometimes what happens, there'll be a change and you actually end up doing something even better than you might have done if you'd actually got to that goal. So I'm a big believer in momentum. I'm a big believer in goal setting. So I think it's really just getting on and doing the best you can at the point in time that you're in. And then, influence the things that you've got control over and try not to worry about the things that you don't have control over.
That's really interesting. I'm actually, very interested in how you're talking about those early years, and I guess yes, the influence, the momentum. I think in our younger years we sometimes don't recognize the momentum. We just think it's going to appear in front of us, and that we are masters of our own destinies. I can see how that's helped you build your career, and I certainly can see how that would translate into your role, your current role in Bartons, but also into the many roles that you've held within the profession. Let's fast forward to today. You've stepped into the role of managing director, so let's talk about that a little bit more, and probably also keen to throw in a little bit here around your role within the MDRT community and the advice community in general. So we might just touch on MDRT. You've held a number of roles in MDRT, and the list is long, so I might even let you touch on that. But you stepped into Oceania, I think. MDRT, yeah, Oceania was your first role. Is that correct?
No, look, I started out state chair for South Australia and then got tapped for Australia, and then that led to Oceania. And then, like, MDRT have a range of leadership training opportunities, from serving at a local level within your own financial services community to then international opportunities. And a big part of the MDRT calendar is their annual meeting. They have one in North America. They have another one in the Asia Pacific region called the Global Conference. We'll have somewhere between 6,000 to 10,000 people attend that. Now, that's an event that is very much curated and designed by the members. And so you get opportunities to serve on a range of committees there, from choosing speakers to developing content, to looking at ethical standards of advice, to productivity. Like that, there are a lot of different areas. So, and again, it's just been an incremental thing. I've just said yes to the opportunities as they've been presented, and sort of done my best with the opportunity, and then you get invited to the next role.
So we probably should explain a little bit more about MDRT, and I think, as a financial advisor, you're probably best placed to do that. I mean, obviously I have some involvement with MDRT, but which is $1 Million Round Table. It isn't a US based organization. Your role, obviously, as you mentioned, has been, in different capacities over the years, and we've certainly felt that impact. What impact do you think it has had in shaping you as an advisor and as a leader?
Significant. And sort of, I reflect back to my first meeting. I was like my mentor at the time, Tony Bongiorno, who passed going back 2.5 years or so ago now, unfortunately, but a brilliant individual, Tony and Joe, both absolute pillars of the financial and accounting profession here in Australia. Tony was that mentor that encouraged me to step away and set up my own business, and then also led me to the role that I'm in at Bartons. But there was a pivotal moment back in 2005. He put an envelope in my hand, and it was the registration to annual meeting in New Orleans, 2005.
Wow.
Airline ticket, and off we go. And the first speaker I heard, I walk into this auditorium in New Orleans with 10,000 people in it, and I'm jet lagged, and it's first thing in the morning, and I'm there with Tony, and there are like smoke machines going and music, and it's like that big American type conference environment. But then there was quite a measured speaker came on, his chap by the name of Patrick Moore, and he talked about this concept of balcony people. And the balcony person is someone that sees something in you that you don't even recognise yourself.
Oh,
And
wow.
I'm sort of sitting there and sitting next to Tony, who is very much my balcony person. And it's the concept of saying we want to elevate people to their full potential. And I found, that was a really insightful and memorable speech. It had huge impact on me. And at the end of that presentation, Tony asked me 2 questions, and I'm a 35-year-old advisor. I've been in financial services for many years at that point. The 2 questions were, what's your ideal client, and what's your unique ability? And at the age of 35, I couldn't answer either of those questions, I'm embarrassed to say. So I was still in that environment where I'd be keen to take on any client. If they came through the door and they wanted my help, I'd say yes every time. And Tony said, really, if you want to be successful, you can't be everything to everyone. And if you try to be everything to everyone, you're going to be nothing to anyone. So work out what you're really good at. And instead of continuing to work on your weaknesses, actually double down on your strengths. And so, that was a sort of the light bulb moment, and it came as a result of MDRT. And then the whole process around MDRT, and I'll just give you a background of who we are, founded in 1927. So we come into our 100th year in 2027. We're in more than 65 countries globally. And MDRT has over 90,000 members. Foundational to MDRT is the concept of the whole person. And it comes back to maybe what I touched on at the start when I was talking about my dad, because he burnt out and passed away, unfortunately, way earlier than he should have. But it's, you can be the most financially successful advisor, but if you don't have balance, and let's say you're not working on relationships with your spouse and your kids, you're not maybe giving a bit back to community, you're not, let's say, looking after yourself physically and emotionally, you're really not going to maybe reach your full potential. So MDRT seeks to give you the tools to be successful as an advisor in terms of being the best financial advisor with a range of different insights. But there's also a lot of work done around just, don't be one-dimensional. You do need to work on all elements of your life. And look, you're never going to get everything perfect. And so, you exert energy in one area and you get a great result. And that means maybe you don't go to gym that week as much as you should. But it's always trying to keep things in as much balance as you possibly can. And I'm not a big believer in life balance. I think we're always a bit out of balance. But it's saying, okay, I'm going to put my energy into these different areas, but I want to make sure that I'm putting it into all of the areas at some point, so that I am looking after myself more broadly.
Yeah, yeah. Um, do you think it's that whole of person approach that I guess, creates the impact, that MDRT has, or is it the fellowship, or is it the the global exposure you have because of, as you say, 90,000 members around the world.
Mm.
Like, where do you think the impact really centers from, or is it all of the above?
Look, it's a lot of those things, but I feel that the essence of it is give and you'll receive. Um,
Mm.
so, I've served on a lot of committees, and I can tell you, for every hour that I've spent on a committee, I've received an amazing reward. It might have been a business insight, it might be a treasured friend for life. Going back to when we went through COVID, there was a real support network when we were all sort of locked up and at home. A global perspective, Australia's an amazingly fortunate place to live, and you get out there and you'll see the rest of the world and how the world is getting on. And, obviously we've seen an enormous amount going on just in the last couple of weeks, but it makes you feel very grateful for what you've got, but at the same time gives you a global view of what's happening as well. Yeah, I think that concept of give and you'll receive is the best way of sort of encapsulating. Or there's another saying with MDRT where you've got a group of people that sort of they steal shamelessly, but they share freely. So there's this real sharing of insights and ideas. And I've been in lots of different groups over many, many years, but the sharing, I think, is one of the most powerful things. It's a very supportive, collegiate environment.
Yeah, yeah. It's quite. I always find it quite humorous, Adam, that the MDRT has their WhatsApp group, so all the different people in the Oceania group can interact, and how many non-Oceania people are in that group that we seem to just adopt as
Yeah.
honorary Aussies. I
Yeah.
find that quite humorous, but I think it's the magnetism of that, that Aussie approach to life. And then, as you say, we live in the best country in the world, but also, embracing that global aspect, of who and what MDRT delivers, that conversations are had from here to, the UK to, wherever. I mean, it's just so rewarding to watch that. If I've got a problem or I've got a question, the cavalcade arrives of voices,
Yeah.
to hey, this has been my experience and this is how I can help. And I just don't see that anywhere else. It's so rewarding and so refreshing.
Yeah, no, it's quite an amazing group. And the interesting thing is, I got involved, as I said, in 2005. And for the first few years that I attended, I'd go along, go to the meeting, listen to the speakers, bring home some CDs and some books. But I wasn't actually volunteering. And it absolutely changed when I put my hand up to go on a committee. It was initially it was being chair for South Australia, but then doing a few things at the annual meetings as well. And that's where you really got the opportunity to meet people. And I think sometimes, as you're an adult, it's not easy to make new friends necessarily. But in this environment where you're actually working on a committee together, all of a sudden you'll find people that you've got a lot in common with, that you're drawn to, and you just build these friendships that you otherwise wouldn't typically in your normal day-to-day life. So that's why I keep going back. I find it, incredibly rewarding.
Well, I'm quite sure that there's good times ahead when the MDRT Global Conference hits Australian shores again this year. So no doubt we'll have a cavalcade again of
Yes.
MDRT members arriving. So it'll be wonderful to see.
Yeah, I should have
Um,
plugged that. So it's going to be in August in Sydney from the
August,
23rd. Yeah.
okay,
So
okay. I believe that it's from what I've heard, it's going to be one heck of an event. So.
yeah. Yeah. Mhm.
Okay, so let's jump back to where you are right now. You're obviously stepped into your MD role in 2025 last year. What's it been like transitioning into that role?
It's been a real learning experience. And, like previously, I was very much looking after the financial services and lending and at our medical client group. Now, and look, I was always working very closely with the accounting side of the organisation, but I think it's been very much a change, and I'm just involved more at a strategic level in terms of where we're going as an organisation. And so again, in terms of being a leader, it's very much it's around influence, I guess, within the organisation, and it's not being in a position. It's actually, I think, what you do. And so, you can say things, but people judge you on your actions, not necessarily just on your words. So you need to be careful what you say. And my operations manager, I'm very fortunate to have a brilliant team around me. But in terms of my operations manager, he continues to remind me, you can do anything, but you can't do everything. And so it's sort of working out the next 2 or 3 important things that you want to work on, delivering to those, and then moving on to the next 2 or 3 things that are important. So yeah, you can try and have this great big list of things that you're wanting to do. I think you're better to have a couple of things that you actually do well than to try and do a whole lot of things and you don't do them as well as you might, because you're biting off more than you can chew.
You sound like my business coach right now. Just do a few things, Jenny, and not so many, and do them well. Lessons learned, lessons learned. So you mentioned the anniversary of the business. I think you said last year was this
last year was 60 years.
60 years. So I mean, obviously, as the business evolves and being obviously the most recent appointee as managing director, I mean, is there a strategic view that how you manage, and the evolution of the business and the brand? I mean, I was tinkering through, as I do, the website of the business, and I was like, it seems like you've really respected the legacy of the business, but at the end of the day, you've got to appeal to your today's client, ideal client, and you can't get anchored too far back. It's a balancing act.
It is. Look, I was at a session, a run on succession going back about 12 months ago, and there was a really powerful description of what it is to be a director and a shareholder. And it was very much you're a custodian. So, this concept of you own something that's yours and it's about you, I think it's the wrong mindset. And I think, as an employee in the business, as a director of the business, as a shareholder of the business, you're wearing different hats. And I think very much as a director and shareholder, it's looking at what's in the best interests of the whole organisation. So I think, when you see a new shareholder come on, there's sometimes this real epiphany of they move from kind of being quite focused on what they're trying to do at an individual level, and they then need to say, okay, I need to look past that to say, okay, there are multiple stakeholders. We've got our employees, we've got our clients, we've got the broader shareholders, we've got community, and how can I deliver to all of those different custodians? And the way we describe it at Bartons is we talk about it as our 3 pillars. We've got our people, and we've got our clients, and we've got community. And so there's always friction between those groups, but it's trying to find the right balance where you're getting good outcomes for all the stakeholders.
I think as leaders in your business, it's easy to get very caught up in the problem solving. So I'm going to throw a question at you in regards to what's actually working really well. How are you communicating to your clients? What's working well for you?
Well, I think I come back to the concept of specialisation, and if you try to be everything to everybody, you're not particularly good to anyone, and that kind of comes back to that unique ability thing that was the Dan Sullivan concept of being clear where you should be playing. So everything you say yes to, you're saying no to something else. And so you need to be clear on what you should be saying yes to, but equally what you should be saying no to. And I guess what's working well for us, we do have that clear specialisation in advice to doctors. And where we get amazing cut through is, and this is sort of a give and receive concept, is we do a lot around educational piece for doctors train for up to more than 15 years to become a specialist. They receive limited to no training to what it means to be a self-employed business owner. And so what we try and do is provide them with those extra resources. The doctor's most valuable commodity is their time, as to, I would say, anyone on this call. So in terms of just having an understanding of where you should, focus your energy and your time, whether it's as a business, as a professional, as a shareholder, in terms of what you're doing strategically, it's that simple concept, and it's hard to do. But it's saying no to the wrong things and yes to the right things. But to do that, you've got to be clear on where you're playing.
Yeah, and I think, if you know your client, then you ultimately know how to deliver your business. I think, too often we focus on the widgets and not necessarily on who's using them. And that can be a real problem because, obviously you're just not engaging with the people that actually you're there to serve. So that's really, I think, very valuable advice you've just given. Okay, well, that's a good snapshot of now. I mean, I'm pretty sure I could go on for ages around what's happening right at this minute because I've no doubt you've got quite a few things on the boil. But let's talk about next. Here I want to talk a little bit about what's next for Bartons. Is there a specific area you're looking to focus on? Growth, retirement, not saying you're retiring, given you've just taken on the job.
No.
But, what's kind of next for you guys?
Really, there are a range of next, in terms of the team, it's continuing to work on an environment where people can do their best work and thrive. And it's attracting and retaining, really good people. It's easy to say, it's not easy to do. And so, we've done that in a range of different ways. Like we've done a lot with Pathway, in terms of we've brought 2 people through the professional year on the financial planning side of things. And we've done a fair bit of work around mapping what a pathway might look like from someone coming into the business and the different steps that they would want to look to take to then work their way through to the different areas of opportunities and growth. So I think if you can visually represent that to people, that's valuable. We had some learnings. We had a group of people that we were wanting to bring to the leadership group, and we thought we had succession really clearly mapped out. This goes back about 5 years ago, and we had 3 of our key people leave in short succession, and there was learning there because we thought we were clearly communicating with people what the pathway was, but we clearly weren't. There were a few other factors. I think COVID played into it a bit as well, but there were some great insights there. So I think there's a really great John Maxwell saying, you're either winning or you're learning. And so, you want to keep learning. You're not always going to get it perfect, but you want to celebrate the wins. But I would say as a business owner at this stage, I've learned a lot more from the things that I've got not particularly right than I have from the things that I've done easily and I've done well. So people is always key. If you don't have good people, you don't, you just don't have an organisation. I think in terms of looking to the future, we're at a point of significant change, and I think particularly with what's going on around AI, and I'm not going to bang on too much about it because there's enough people that know more about it than I do, but I do feel that we are at an inflection point, and so we are doing a fair bit of work around how do we use some of the tools that are there, coming back to that concept of time as your most valuable resource. Having people doing more high-end stuff that's a value add. And I talked earlier about, we're in the relationship business. So if we can unshackle ourselves from a lot of this mundane and compliance-driven stuff to being able to actually focus on building deeper relationships with our clients, that sets us up for success. So I think if you ignore what's going on in the AI space, you're going to be left behind. And I'm really delighted. I've got a few people within the business that are really working hard around, okay, what are the good things that we can do? And again, it's not trying to do everything all at once. It's picking a couple of things and refining that and then moving on to the next piece. But that whole environment excites me enormously. we're going to double down on what we're good at, which is the doctor space. We work with a lot of the medical colleges, and we find just being involved in that educational piece is a really valuable thing. And the other piece is just continuing to work on yourself in terms of, it's that continual ongoing learning and development. I'd say for any aspiring person in terms of leadership, read as many books on leadership as you can. There's a lot of great stuff out there, but there's groups like the Australian, Institute of Company Directors, great resources there as well. Whether it's the FAAA or MDRT or whatever it is, get involved with a community of people, because, you can sometimes get so wrapped up in the doing, and you've heard the concept of working in instead of working on. I think as a business owner, you really do need to try and take that helicopter view and step out of the business as much as you can, talk to other people, because there's a saying, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. And so you really do want to get out and about and talk to other smart people so that you can bring in those great ideas to your organisation.
Yeah. I think one of the things you mentioned there about, if you're an aspiring, a young person aspiring, I think you're quite right. The pathways today are so very, very different to, even 10 years ago, let alone 20. And certainly I would agree with you. There are so many, organizations and associations now that can act as such incredible support mechanisms for you. And MDRT obviously has their academy, just as, the FAAA has their pathways. Obviously for accounting, it's slightly different, but, if there was sort of someone, you've mentioned Dan Sullivan, you've mentioned a couple of names here. If there was someone that, as an aspiring, leader or advice professional, that you would want to, learn a little bit about, who would that person kind of be? Like, who would you suggest
Yeah,
they go and invest some time in learning up
yeah.
on?
I think, there are so many different people out there. What I brought back from the last MDRT meeting was the concept of having your own board of directors through AI. And so
Wow.
I built this, and so the people I have on my board of directors now, and the way this works is I've got my own personal advisory board, and this is an AI agent, and I've got Stephen Covey on there. I've got Dan Sullivan. I've got a local Sue Viskovic in terms of the whole pricing
Oh,
piece.
yeah. No, Sue.
Sorry, I've got an ambulance going by.
It's okay, as long as it's not for you.
No, it's not for me. In terms of sort of more philosophical, Ryan Holiday, who is around Stoicism, and then in terms of breakthrough, I think Tony Robbins is a great person to listen to. So now the way this agent works is when I'm dealing with a thorny issue at a management or a leadership level, I'll pose that question to my agent, and it draws on every book that these people have ever written and brings together their wisdom, and then throws up some concepts for me to consider. So instead of me trying to go and read, 50 different books, this actually synthesizes all of that into one powerful library, and I present an issue to it, and it gives me back some really great thinking that, if I tried to do that just off my own bat, it wouldn't be easy. So that's an AI solution, and there's a few names for you to consider.
Wow, I love that concept of having your own sort of AI advisory board, but just, or your board of directors, because it's just quite true, although I'm very renowned for having the stack of books on my desk, and then I'm like trying to leaf through the pages to find the section that was, but you're right. I mean, this is where the technology can help, bring that collateral together in one space, one moment.
Yeah.
Although I must admit, I do still like picking up a book.
I think actually reading is great too, and it's not just
It's
about AI.
healthy.
But look, if anyone wants that prompt in terms of that concept of giving and receiving,
Absolutely.
I'm
I
happy
will
to share that.
definitely reach out to you about that. I love that idea. Um, just to sort of also add, I'm really conscious of, we're at that point of inflection you mentioned, and some advisors, some businesses are struggling with that. Some are early adopters, some are running to catch up but keen, and that's great. Where do you sort of see all this being in, say, 10 years time? I think, I mean, but it could be in 5 years time at this rate. But like, is everyone going to need an integrated model? Is everyone going to need an AI agent to sort of support them in their business structure? Where do you see this all looking? How is it going to look in the next 5 or 10 years?
I think the key part of being a great advisor is having that relationship and empathy, and so they're the sort of things that I don't feel that AI are going to solve, but I do feel that a lot of the back end administrative and compliance burden that we've been putting up with, particularly since with the Royal Commission, a lot of those shackles will be unchained.
Mhm.
You know, I think it's going to be radically different to what it is today. But people do like to deal with people. I'm a big believer in that human interface. What I would say to people at the moment that are grappling with it a bit, you don't need to do a lot to, you can start having a play with it. I would encourage, though, you do need to be careful, and particularly if you've got a team, if you don't have already in place the your kind of your guidelines or your governance rules around the use of AI, you are leaving yourself potentially exposed. You do want a closed system. You will have heard the saying that if you're using technology and you're not paying for it, ultimately you're the product, and so we use Copilot because it's a closed environment. There are a range of other paid subscriptions there. So I think you do need to pay for something, and so and there are the whole ethical concerns around where it all goes as well. And I think that's too much for us to unpack on this podcast. But
That's another podcast. I do agree, that the importance of innovation and technology is obviously forms part of that, as do people. Is one of those things that is going to be very much part of the next phase. But I think that's where you've mentioned, like, pay for it, test and measure. That's really important. But I also think that's where the advantage of community can actually play out,
yeah,
because there's always someone particularly in an MDRT community, or even if in the, an advice community, wherever, that has done something before you, So I
yes,
think it's important to know that you can reach out and
yeah.
ask for help.
Yeah, you don't feel like you've got to reinvent the wheel.
Correct.
Just tap into that knowledge that's within your immediate community, and then there's all those leadership and thought leaders out there as well. But yeah, I think it's going to change. I feel that the next 3 years we're going to see more change than we've probably seen over the last 15 years. So, but I find that pretty exciting. But at the same time, there are going to be a few little pitfalls and traps along the way. Nothing's perfect. So, yeah, just don't always take for granted what you're getting is 100% correct. You do need to use your professional insight. I think that's really important.
That's very, very true. And keep people at the forefront of it.
Yeah,
That's the key.
yeah,
Don't get trapped into it's all very well and good, but if we lose sight of who it's all about, then, we're kind of doing it for the wrong reasons, aren't we?
correct. Yeah.
Okay. So I've asked a lot of the hard questions, but here's a real cliffhanger. Outside of the day to day, what's on your wish list for the next 12 months? What are you hoping to do? What are you hoping to achieve? Whether it's within in the professional, whether it's something that's on your wish list that
Yeah.
you want to do personally.
Look, at a business level, it's very much around succession. We've got new directors and shareholders coming up. I find that really exciting, that next generation, that renewal within the business. So that's one of the main things I'm focusing on. I've got a lot of travel coming up, bit of personal stuff, but a lot with MDRT. I'm on Global Council at the moment, it's a group of about 12 advisors from around the world, and we're sort of on this board of advice to sort of plan the next generation and the things that we're doing there. So that's quite exciting. At a personal level, I've got 3 adult children, and I just I get really excited seeing my daughter's just bought her first house. My son's just recently graduated in his business degree. I've got my youngest studying artificial AI and robotics in an engineering degree, and he's he makes my head explode with what he explains to me. So I think just seeing your kids come forward. I'm married to a really talented artist, which is completely different to what I do. So they say opposites attract, and she's very different to me, thank goodness. So just tracking her artistic career, I get a lot out of that. And look, I love a bit of Formula One, just a bit of boys' fun. So getting along to a few races as well along the way. So there are just a few bits and pieces. I think the other thing, and this is a Bartons piece, is the community piece. I talk about, I feel incredibly fortunate in terms of the experiences I've had in life. But not everyone's got that lived experience. We're supporting a range of groups here in Adelaide. I think one of them that I feel does some amazing work is the Hutt Street Mission for homeless people. And so, we get the opportunity to go along and work in the kitchen there and just see people coming in who, doing it a bit tough. And so I think, just being able to give a bit back, I think it's a fantastic thing as well, because, I think we are all incredibly fortunate here in Australia, but there are some people doing it tough. So, if you can give a bit back along the way, I think that's a great thing as well.
Wow, that is an extensive list. I do like that. Let me guess. Are you going to the Singapore F1 race?
I'm not. No, I did look at Singapore. I'm going to be going to the race in Austin, Texas. So, just in terms of the way the calendar works, that's where I'm landing. So, it'll be my first overseas Formula One race, and so
Wow.
I am keenly looking forward to that. But yeah, so
Oh,
there's
that's on my wish list, actually. That's
yeah.
definitely on my wish list. So, and my husband's, we're both F1 tragics. So,
Oh, good to hear.
well, and let me tell you, we're very opposite. So the fact that we actually both like F1 is really something.
Yeah. I know my wife has got into Drive to Survive, and she's gone from someone who's not interested
Yeah, I
to
said
getting
as
into
soon as the Netflix show started, I think that was during COVID, I was like, "Oh, this F1 thing is really good."
it. Yeah, pretty cool.
It
Yeah.
is. Okay, so, last question, and I know I've been peppering you with quite a lot, but looking back, was there one pivotal moment that really felt changed your trajectory of your journey from then to now?
Yeah. And look, I did touch on this briefly before. It was, that invitation to go to New Orleans in 2005, and Tony and Joe Bongiorno, sort of the balcony people that they saw something in me that I didn't recognise myself, and those two really pivotal questions around, unique ability, specialisation. I read Dan Sullivan's book after that, Unique Ability. There's a great book to read if people haven't read it. So that really did change the course of my professional career. But I've got also a range of friends that I never would have met as a result of that experience. So I think for the let's say the advisors and the business owners on the call today, there's so much you can do by mentoring. So you can see that, like that gem in the rough, that just with the right words of encouragement and appropriate advice, both encouragement, sometimes a bit of tough love, but that those two elements of sort of putting some guardrails around good people so they can do their best work. So that was pivotal to me. So I just encourage everyone that listens to this podcast, if you're on the journey, find a great mentor, and if you've got lived experience, be happy to share it with those around you.
Yeah, yeah, and what did you call balcony people?
The balcony person.
I
Yeah.
love that. I just actually think that is that's actually quite aspirational to be somebody's balcony person is I think you've got to really know who you are yourself and achieved a certain level of experience to be able to share that and as a mentor. I think that's truly wonderful. Adam, thank you so much. This has been, I feel like I've got 1,000 more questions in my head, but I think that's probably enough for now.
So,
Thank you very much for joining me on the Genesis Gems podcast, Then Now Next, and I look forward to speaking to you again soon.
thanks, Jenny, and thanks everyone for joining us today.
Thanks for tuning in to the Genesis Gems podcast. This season marks 20 years of Genesis, and it's all about reflecting on where we've come from, recognising the momentum we've built, and imagining what's next. If today's conversation sparks something for you, make sure to subscribe and share it with a colleague. And if you're ready to explore your Then Now Next story, I'd love to hear from you. Until next time, keep turning your ideas into reality.